We have quite a lot to cover today. We'll be talking about freelancing for artists in 2022. And there's lots of things that kind of occupy our mind and the way we work. There's lots of challenges with remote work. There's lots of challenges with how we as creatives can make sure that our work is really finding the right people and the right audience and is really resonating with them. Because as we know, in each next year, there's more and more content being created, and the word content itself can be a little bit problematic when we talk about creativity and the arts because it's very linked with how productive we are and how much we are producing all the time. And when we want to bring quality over quantity, then it can be very challenging as an artist to make sure that the work we do really resonates with the right people. So we'll be diving into all of this with some personal examples and some questions for you that you can jot down now, or if you're watching the recording, you can press pause and you can think about some of these questions also. So let's get started. Why, in the first place, why are we looking at the arts? How can we use the arts to actually make an impact on our business or on someone else's business? I think the arts have three key components that make them a very strong avenue for connecting with the audience. They can foster a deeper connection, so something that makes us think a little bit longer or a few days after we encounter a piece of art, then we can reflect. Art has this very funny way of invading our mind, so it can foster a longer connection. It's very visceral, so sometimes it can also shock or really provoke us in an interesting way. Some of the most important artworks really rely on this shock value or shock factor, and this is something that we can leverage and make sure our work is really hitting the emotional pain points that we want. And then finally, art can also be nonverbal, which is really key when we want to reach a wider audience. We want our work to be more international, to find people that are not within our own circle of connections. So sometimes by using visuals or movement or film, we can actually be very creative with the targeting of who we're reaching with the work. This is a little bit about me and my background as director and choreographer. And as Anna said, a lot of different experiences throughout very different places in the world. Um, I have over 22 years of experience as a dancer. I started when I was 5 years old, and dancing slowly led me to a much more multidisciplinary way of creating art. My main focus is exploring empathy through movement and storytelling. I work with different mediums like films, with live performance, with immersive performance, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I have a BA in dance from Columbia University in New York and a master's degree in human rights and democratization from the Global Campus in Venice. I started when I was my first professional job as a dancer was, as Anna said, in Vietnam on Dancing with the Stars. I was the youngest professional dancer and choreographer on the show. Then I moved to New York, and now I'm living and creating in Sofia in Bulgaria. And my current focus is on really leveraging the personal and the political in this context of Bulgaria, and investigating how my own identity as a person and as an artist can really make Bulgaria a more empathetic place. And my most recent work is as the founder of my own production company, Studio Karakashyan, where we produce my own work, but we also work with up and coming directors, and we try to really teach the new generation of artists to be advocates for themselves and to really harness the power that the arts can have. This was going to be my next question for you. Where do we see the difference between a creative and an artist? I don't want to put a very specific definition on this. There's lots of different interpretations, but I'd like to offer a suggestion. I think for me, the difference is when we think of someone as a creative, as the noun has become more and more part of the way we speak about business, someone who identifies as a creative, we often bring in to kind of offer a solution to a problem that we have or to offer a new way of thinking. Whereas when we think of ourselves as artists, there's more of a personal agency with the work. So we feel like we can bring our own interpretation, we can bring our own message, we can bring our own vision about the topic that we're creating on. And I'd like to invite all of us who are listening now to consider this shift. We might be working with clients, but that doesn't mean that we don't already offer our own expertise, our own perspective, and who we are as artists. So I think there's artistry in every single field if we dare to think of ourselves as this very bold, very free mind who can dare to think of themselves as an artist. And this is a battle that we have to lead on a daily, ongoing basis sometimes. I think it also has a lot to do with the external and the internal perception. Sometimes being a creative and an artist, I know a lot of you who are watching can maybe identify with this, is that it can feel quite lonely when we're freelancing. It can feel like sometimes there's not enough work, or things are very slow, or we're trying to package something that is very personal and can be very precarious. We're trying to package it and make it into a product and trying to live off this, which can be very taxing mentally. Um, I think this has a lot to do with the bias being in this industry, seeing how many creatives there are around us with a similar skill set, a similar background. And something that I found really helpful is if we as artists can kind of suspend our perception for a second and think of how someone who doesn't have this daily practice of being an artist can look at our work. Sometimes my most inspiring encounters are with people who um, don't dare to create on a daily basis, and they see artists who get to make something as almost this like very magical creature. They're always so curious about how did you manage to put this idea into a painting or into a dance, and there's really a sense of wonder and astonishment that I think is very important for us to kind of let this feeling stay with us. So whenever we're feeling down and we feel like there's so many other people making better work or similar work, and we can't really feel the value that we bring as artists and creatives, is to remember, I'm sure you've had at least one encounter with someone who really responds very enthusiastically and mm, very spontaneously to the work that you do. So try to recall this feeling whenever you're feeling like there is not much purpose to what we're doing. Mm, This is kind of the key message that all of the projects that we'll be going over today bring us back to, is that your artistic practice brings value and focus beyond your own world. So what this means is that again take um, if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture, art can go into a lot of different areas, and it's a very flexible way to impact the perspective of people. We can think of art as something commercial, as something that can be used to sell products. We can think of our art practice as a way to consult and solve problems in an organization or with people, or to really challenge them to approach what they're already working on from a new perspective. We can think of our art practice as a means of stimulating expression. This can be our own self expression, so it can mean, trying a completely different medium. If you're a graphic designer, and you can think about writing. If you're a performer, you can think about trying to make something with your hands, and it can mean anything. But it can also be way to inspire people who don't get to express on a daily basis, to dig a little deeper and find how this practice can unlock some of their own potential. And then finally, my favorite, this is the one that I've been focusing most on, is how we can use art as a very strong statement in a social context. The project that Anna teased a little bit is called Waiting for Color. This was my first film that I created in 2018. It was a project that I made still as a student with zero budget, and it's a film that over the years has been part of over 30 film festivals. It's been used by NGOs and organizations in Canada, in the States, in Bulgaria, to highlight the problems that the LGBTQ community is facing. It's won several awards, and it's still being programmed at festivals. This was a project that, for me as a creative, as an artist, happened very spontaneously. I felt very moved and very. I felt like this was a project that I needed to bring out from my body into the world, because I was feeling so frustrated learning about the persecution of people in Chechnya who were being systematically threatened, kidnapped, tortured. Some of them were murdered by members of their own family or by the government for being LGBTQ. And this was something, for me, living as a queer person in New York on a daily basis, reading about this news made me feel so powerless and so angry that this was going on anywhere in the world. So, working on Waiting for Color, it was a self produced project working with the testimonies of people who had been kidnapped and then were released. All of their stories were released anonymously. And I wanted to create a visual that would somehow let more people discover these stories and kind of give a face to the stories of these people. So we worked with very small crew, a skeleton crew of filmmaker, director of photography, a composer, and me, and we created this very deceptively simple film. It's a 7-minute film of me expressing through movement the stories of these people. And while I'm performing, you can hear two voice actors telling and recounting the real quotes of what had happened. And after we created this film, we had the artistic piece, but a much bigger part of the puzzle was actually how do we release it? How can we make sure that it can have this larger life, and how can it contribute to the cause, and where is the best place to show it? So this is the question. Sometimes it doesn't matter if it's our personal work or it's work for someone else. We have to be very clear and very strategic with where we present the work, especially nowadays when there's more opportunities to make impression online. We can be very strategic from the get-go. These are the, for me, kind of by order of importance, how I try to approach each project. So I'll give you an example with Waiting for Color. The first component is the organizations that are already working on this topic. For Waiting for Color, these were two main organizations that we reached out to. First, it was the Russian LGBT network, who were the organization that were the first one to speak out about this issue. So they were the ones that published the report with the testimonies that we used. And from the beginning of the project, I reached out to them, and even though they didn't support it financially, or they didn't endorse it officially, we were in close contact to just let them know that this piece is happening. And then when they saw the finished work, then they were able to also use it as part of their materials, and they were a lot more confident to sign on to it. And then for the release itself, I worked with a Bulgarian NGO called Single Step. They organized the online premiere and a physical premiere in Bulgaria. They also helped us with the PR and really creating a big wave in the Bulgarian media about this issue in Chechnya. Um, Very important is to always try to reach out to media outlets that are not just arts oriented. If the piece is rooted in a social issue, then I think it always has the power to reach mainstream media, and we shouldn't be shy to restrict our work to this creative or artistic sector, but to also be bold and reach out to organizations that are beyond our primary scope. Then the next piece of the puzzle is the partnerships that don't really cost a lot. So partnerships that are just organizations who enjoy the projects, organizations that we have a close relationship to, that are willing to share and amplify our message. These aren't the key partners that might have who might have more of involvement in the message, but organizations who are just supporters of the work. And then the last one we often forget because we focus so much on the big picture, but especially with creatives, sometimes we still have to do the legwork and find our personal network and reach out to people one by one, invite them to see the work and ask them to share the work, and really to really be there. I find that in my experience, it's very paradoxical that the bigger the work gets, the less and less people that are in within my circle know about it. So more and more people who had more strangers are finding out about our work. But then the bigger the projects get, actually the people in our own circles somehow are always the last to learn about it. So we're also making sure to do this extra step at the end that can be very tiring after you've created a product and you've reached out to these organizations, you've done the interviews with media, then to also think about who do I know and how do I make sure that they see it. But actually, this is so important. It's the last bit that can sometimes get the most juice to the project. The next work that I want to highlight is a performance that we created this year. It's called The Last Sunset, and this is a immersive production, which means that a live audience gets to experience the piece itself in a live setting. So um, each audience member is brought to the regional landfill in Gabrovo. This project was part of the Gabrovo Biennial, and it was done together with Greenpeace as part of their campaign to put a ban on fossil fuel advertising. The Last Sunset is a dystopian live performance, which puts us in the future where we didn't do enough. So all of the air and the water on Earth has been contaminated and polluted beyond repair. So we're living in, there's a bubble of people called the corporation who still have access to clean air, but everyone else, the normal everyday people, have their whole bodies have transformed from the exposure to all of this dystopian wasteland. So this piece was very complicated to produce. There were various partners. It was supported by Goethe Institute, by the National Culture Fund of Bulgaria, by Foundation Art Office, and by the Zinger Zakaria Foundation. It had dance artists from Germany and Bulgaria working together. And the picture that you see is shot at one of the coal power plants in Bulgaria. That's Brickell in Golubovo, which has systematically been sanctioned for all of the for putting so much pollution in the air and really poisoning the people who live in Golubovo. And a lot of our work is very direct. We try to put the arts directly into these situations. The last sunset was very rewarding because having the audience move through these huge spaces and the Gabrovo landfill and seeing this very dystopian future was really key to amplifying the message of Greenpeace. And these social partnerships, I invite every artist listening to think a little bit about beyond the work that we're doing for clients. Is there an issue that we already, as individuals, feel so connected to that we can't help but want to comment on? It can sometimes feel a little bit, it can be very daunting to work on these topics, but I'm sure each of you has something that they already feel very personally connected to, and it doesn't take that much effort to think about how we can comment on it. So then the next step is just finding the medium and finding the people who can help us with this message. These are just some pointers on when we're thinking about the message. Is, do we want to create a universe? Do we want to leave the audience with a certain sensation? Maybe we want to leave them feeling inspired, or maybe we want them to really face the harsh reality of what the issue is. As I said, immersive experiences are very, very powerful. And then I always ask this to artists as kind of the last check. Is there a message? Because we tend to get very drawn into the emotional world, and sometimes we forget the message itself that we want to leave the audience with. The big question that is always behind this is, what is the end goal? How do we convey the impact that we want to see? And this is why partnering with organizations is very key. They always have a call to action that they're already working on, and it's up to us to find how, through our creativity, we can kind of create a marriage between their call to action and what we can drive the audience to. I wanted to also briefly talk about a project that we started, and it only was up and running for a year, but it's still a very important project to me, and it shows that sometimes we have to experiment a little bit, and not every project that we do will be successful, because I think as freelancers we don't often talk about our failures, so this is just something to put in there and to put things into perspective. This was also an LGBTQ project that I launched a year and a half ago, called OutBG. It was a platform for a media platform for the LGBTQ community in Bulgaria, highlighting artists and all types of creatives. And this was a project that I invested a lot of resources and a lot of time into it. But while it didn't work out, it was also a really important project because of all of the kind of the ripple effects of the artists that got involved and the contacts that all of the artists on this platform made. It's still live, so if you're interested, you can check it out at OutBG. And very quickly before we wrap up, these are some of the things that I want to leave you with as the challenges that we have in 2022 is because of the way that we're working often remotely, our work can get very task oriented when we're working over email or over meetings. We often tend to make and compartmentalize our artistic work into tasks that need to happen rather than these long processes that we know our work usually entails. So I would invite you, whether you're working remotely with a team or working on your own, to always think of what is the kind of the long stroke of the project. It's not just accomplishing this and this and this, but can we think of the project and the idea that we want to communicate as something more ongoing? What would the project look like if it didn't take us a month? Would it look like if we had 3 years to work on just this issue? And I find this helps a little bit to untie the knots of not being able to really sit down and kind of dream a little bit more about the work. With the online community, we often have this problem of having a lot of eyeballs on our work, but not necessarily the right people. And again, this brings us back to the organizations and finding the value of our artistic work. To really hone in on the message, we need partners and organizations that can help us really find the right people, find the right media contacts, and then it's much easier to build a brand as an artist rather than, putting just yourself and the work on the forefront. And then finally, just being aware and thinking of how is our work accessible and how are we making it more accessible for different communities. I wanted to recommend some resources about workflow, collaboration, and organizations. But as I was making this slide, I realized that there is so much more than we can cover. So I'd like to leave you with my contact information for anyone who felt any of these questions resonate. And if you're working on a project specifically and you want a more customized toolkit, I'd love to talk to all of you one-on-one and kind of leave you with some more specific resources for your own projects and who might be the right people or the right tools to make it happen. So you can take a screenshot. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook with just my name, and then my email is kosta@studiokarakashyan.com.